I want you to imagine something for me. It is a Tuesday morning, quiet street. You have driven to your local bank branch the same way you have driven there for the past 20 years. Same route, same car park, same teller you recognize behind the counter. You walk up, you hand over your card, you ask to withdraw your usual amount of cash for the week, and the teller looks at you apologetically and says, "I'm sorry, we can't process that here anymore." Not because your account is empty, not because there is a problem with your identity, not because you have done anything wrong whatsoever, but because the bank changed its rules last Monday. And nobody sent you a letter, nobody rang you, nobody stood up and made an announcement. It just changed. And now the way you have accessed your own money for 2 decades no longer works the way it used to. This is not a hypothetical. This is happening to Australian seniors right now, in branches across the country, at ATMs that have been quietly reconfigured, through policies that have been updated on bank websites in language that most people would need a law degree to fully understand. And the people being hit hardest are the people who rely on cash the most: older Australians, pensioners, people who grew up in a time when cash was simply how the world worked, people who budget with it, who feel safer with it, who have used it their entire adult lives without ever once being made to feel like that was a problem. Today I am going to tell you exactly what is changing, which banks are doing it, what your rights actually are, and most importantly, what you can do right now this week to make sure you are not caught off guard, because the banks are counting on you not knowing, and I am not willing to let that happen. My name is your name. This channel exists for one reason: to take the rules, the changes, and the fine print that affects Australian seniors and retirees and explain it in plain language before it costs you. If you are new here, subscribe before you leave and hit the notification bell. Because the kind of information I cover on this channel is exactly the kind of thing that lands in your life without warning if nobody tells you it is coming. And if you have a parent, a neighbor, a friend who is older and relies on cash, please share this video with them today, not tomorrow. Today, because this is already happening and the clock is already running. Right, let's get into exactly what is going on. For the past several years, Australian banks have been on a quiet but very deliberate mission to reduce their reliance on physical cash infrastructure. That means closing branches, removing ATMs, reducing teller services, introducing fees on over-the-counter cash transactions, and now, changing the rules around how much cash you can access, how often, and through which channels. The major banks have been rolling out what they internally call cash handling policy updates. In plain English, that means they are redesigning the rules around cash withdrawals in ways that push customers, especially older customers, toward digital transactions. EFTPOS, direct transfers, online banking, mobile apps. Now I want to be fair here. The banks will tell you this is about efficiency, about modernizing their services, about serving the majority of their customers who have already moved to digital. And there is some truth in that. Digital banking works well for millions of Australians. But here is the problem. It does not work equally well for all Australians. And the group for whom it works the worst, the group who is most dependent on physical cash, most uncomfortable with digital systems, and most likely to be financially harmed by sudden restrictions on cash access, is older Australians. Pensioners. The exact people who can least afford to absorb unexpected changes to how they manage their money. And these changes are being rolled out with minimal direct communication to the customers they affect most. Let me tell you specifically what has changed and what is changing. The first change is branch-based cash withdrawal restrictions. Several major banks have now introduced limits on how much cash you can withdraw over the counter at a branch without triggering additional verification steps or fees. In some cases, withdrawals above a certain threshold now require advance notice, meaning you need to call the bank ahead of time and request the cash before you come in. If you just walk in and ask for a larger amount, they may not have it available or they may decline the transaction entirely. This is a significant change for people who are used to walking into a branch and withdrawing whatever they need. The threshold amounts vary by bank and by branch, but in many cases they are lower than you might expect. We are not talking about thousands of dollars. In some branches, restrictions are kicking in on withdrawals of $2,000 or more. The second change involves ATM daily withdrawal limits being quietly reduced at certain machines. Most Australians know their card has a daily ATM limit, typically set by the bank and adjustable through internet banking or by calling the bank. What many people do not know is that individual ATMs also have their own internal cash limits, and these are being reduced at many locations. So even if your card limit says you can withdraw $1,000 per day, the ATM itself may now only dispense $500 in a single transaction, requiring you to do multiple transactions to get what you need. For someone who budgets weekly cash in a single trip, this is a real and frustrating change. The third change, and this is the one that is affecting the most people, is the gradual withdrawal of ATM infrastructure from regional and suburban areas. When a bank removes an ATM from a shopping center or a main street, the nearest replacement is often kilometers away. For older Australians without reliable transport, or those in regional communities where the only bank in town has now removed its machine, accessing cash has become genuinely difficult. The Australian Banking Association will tell you that there are more ATMs in Australia than ever before if you count all providers, and that is technically true. But many of those ATMs belong to third-party operators who charge fees for every withdrawal. For a pensioner withdrawing $100 to cover the week's groceries, a $2.50 or $3 ATM fee is not a minor inconvenience. Over a year, it is real money coming directly out of their pension. Now let me tell you about something that most Australians do not know exists. There is a piece of legislation in this country called the Banking Code of Practice, and under that code, the major banks have made commitments to their customers, commitments that are relevant to exactly what we are talking about today. The code commits banks to providing reasonable access to cash. It commits them to giving notice of significant changes to products and services. It commits them to taking the needs of vulnerable customers, including elderly Australians, into account when making decisions about services and branches. These are not vague aspirations. They are commitments the banks have signed up to. And if a bank is failing to meet them, if your bank has changed how you access your cash without giving you adequate notice, or if their changes are making it unreasonably difficult for you to access your money, you have the right to complain, formally. And those complaints go somewhere. The Australian Financial Complaints Authority, AFCA, is the independent body that handles complaints about banks. They are free to use. You do not need a lawyer. You do not need to be financially savvy. You just need to explain what happened and why it affected you. And AFCA has the power to make binding decisions against banks. I want you to remember that, because in a moment I am going to give you the exact steps to take if you believe your bank has treated you unfairly. But first, I want to talk about something that sits underneath all of this and rarely gets said out loud. The move away from cash is not neutral for older Australians. It is not just an inconvenience. For many pensioners, cash is not simply a preference. It is a financial management tool. It is a safety net. It is independence. When you have cash in your wallet, you know exactly how much you have. There is no app to check, no statement to read, no PIN to remember, no risk of your card being declined at the checkout because the machine is having issues. Cash does not get skimmed. Cash does not get caught up in a bank outage. Cash works when the power goes out. Cash works when you have been scammed and your accounts have been frozen. Cash works in an emergency when every other system has failed. For a generation of Australians who grew up managing their finances with cash, the sudden restriction of that access is not just inconvenient. It is disorienting. It is stressful. And in some cases, it is genuinely harmful. I had a woman contact me, I will call her Gloria, who lives in a small town in regional South Australia. The only branch in her town closed 2 years ago. The ATM that replaced it was run by a third-party operator and charged fees. Then that ATM was removed entirely. The nearest bank branch is now 43 kilometers away. Gloria does not drive. She relies on a neighbor for transport once a week to get groceries. That neighbor does not always have time to drive 43 kilometers to a bank branch. Gloria is not an extreme case. There are thousands of Glorias across regional and rural Australia. And the banks closing branches and removing ATMs will point to statistics about digital adoption and customer usage patterns. But Gloria is not a statistic. She is a person, she is a pensioner, and she is being systematically cut off from her own money by an industry that is prioritizing efficiency over equity. This matters, and the people in power need to hear that it matters. Not just from me, from you, from the people it is actually affecting. Now let me give you the practical steps, because I never want to leave you with just a problem and no path forward. Step 1. Know your limits. This week, before anything else, I want you to find out exactly what your bank's current cash withdrawal limits are, for your ATM card, for over-the-counter withdrawals, and for online transfers. Call your bank directly on their main customer service number or visit a branch and ask them to explain, in plain English, exactly what your daily and per-transaction limits are. Write it down. Put it somewhere you can find it, because knowing your limits before you need them is far better than discovering them in a moment of urgency. Step 2. Check your nearest ATM options. Go to your bank's website or app and use their ATM locator to see where the nearest ATMs are to your home. Note whether they are your bank's own ATMs, which are typically fee-free for account holders, or third-party ATMs that will charge you. If your nearest fee-free ATM has changed recently, this is worth knowing now. Step 3. Consider requesting a limit increase. If your current ATM daily limit does not meet your typical cash needs, you can call your bank and request an increase to your daily withdrawal limit. Most banks will do this for long-term customers with good account history. It takes one phone call and usually takes effect within a day or two. If you regularly need more than your current limit allows, do not wait until you need it urgently. Do it this week. Step 4. If you rely on over-the-counter cash withdrawals for larger amounts, call your bank now and ask about their advance notice requirements. Some branches now require you to call ahead before coming in to withdraw above a certain amount so they can have the cash prepared. Find out what your branch's threshold is and how much notice they need. Again, one phone call now saves you a frustrating surprise later. Step 5. If you feel your bank has changed its services in a way that has unreasonably affected your ability to access your money, make a formal complaint. First, complain directly to the bank, in writing if you can, or over the phone and ask for a reference number. Give them the opportunity to respond. If you are not satisfied with their response, take your complaint to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority. Their website is afca.org.au. Their phone number is 1-8009-31678. The service is completely free and completely independent. Step 6. If you are in a regional or rural area and you are struggling to access cash because of branch closures or ATM removals, contact your local federal member of parliament. I know that sounds like a big step, but the issue of cash access in regional Australia has been raised in parliament before, and the more constituents who raise it directly with their local member, the more pressure there is on banks to maintain reasonable access. Your voice matters here, genuinely. Now I want to talk about something that ties into all of this and that I think is worth saying clearly. There is a campaign in Australia, relatively quiet but growing, called Cash Acceptance Advocacy. The argument is simple. Cash is legal tender. Every Australian has the right to use it. And as businesses and banks increasingly refuse or restrict cash transactions, there is a real question about whether vulnerable Australians are being excluded from basic economic participation. Several countries have moved to protect cash access by law. Norway has legislation requiring businesses to accept cash. Sweden, despite being one of the most cashless societies in the world, passed legislation to protect cash access specifically because they saw the harm that rapid digitalization was causing to elderly citizens. The European Central Bank has taken a firm position that cash must remain accessible and acceptable across the Eurozone. Australia does not yet have those protections, but that conversation is happening. And the more Australians who understand what is at stake and who speak up about it, the more likely it is that our lawmakers will take it seriously. Let me come back to Gloria for a moment. The last time I heard from her, she had found a partial solution. The local supermarket in her town had extended their cashback service, meaning she could now get up to $200 cash back when she bought her groceries each week. It does not solve everything. It ties her cash access to a purchase. It limits the amount she can get at once, but it means she is not completely without options. And that is something worth knowing. If you are in an area where ATMs are scarce, cashback at supermarkets and service stations is a real alternative. Most major supermarkets offer it. Many smaller retailers do too. You do not need to make a large purchase to get cashback. In many cases, a small transaction qualifies. It is not a perfect solution, but it is a practical one while the bigger battles are being fought. I also want to mention Australia Post. The Bank at Post service allows customers of most major banks to deposit and withdraw cash at Australia Post outlets. If your local bank branch has closed but there is a post office nearby, Bank at Post may give you access to basic banking services, including cash withdrawals. It is not available for every account type, and there are limits. But for many Australians in areas where bank branches have closed, it has become a genuine lifeline, worth checking if it applies to your account. Here is what I want you to take away from today. You have rights, you have options, and you are not alone in this. The shift away from cash is real. The impact on older Australians is real. The changes your bank is making to how you access your money are real. But so are the protections, the complaint mechanisms, and the alternatives. The most important thing you can do right now, today, is to understand your current situation, know your limits, know your options, and know who to call if things change in a way that leaves you worse off, because the banks are making these changes quietly. And quietly is how things get worse without anyone noticing. But you have noticed, and now you know. If this video gave you something useful, if it told you something you needed to know, please do one thing before you go. Share it. Put it on Facebook. Send it to your adult children. Share it in your local community group or your seniors club. Because somewhere in your network right now, there is a person who is going to walk into their bank next week and be told something has changed. And if they have watched this video, they will know exactly what to do. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you are not already. Turn on the bell so you catch the next one. Because next time, I am going to cover something that connects directly to what we talked about today. The Centrelink scam that is targeting Australian pensioners right now, using fake bank change notices to steal pension payments directly out of accounts. It is sophisticated, it is widespread, and it is working because people do not know what to look for. You need to see that one. I will see you then.